Hey everyone, Chev here. Today I'm going to be doing a Fantasy Grounds tutorial. I have a couple friends who are starting to use Fantasy Grounds as DMs. As players, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot to learn if the DM takes care of you. But as a DM, there's a ton of stuff in Fantasy Grounds to learn. However, I'm going to start off by showing you how to use Fantasy Grounds in the simplest ways possible. So just how to just hit the ground running with the most basic tools that you possibly can. So in order to do that, I'm going to load a campaign that I just created. We just random campaign called Fantasy Adventure. It has nothing in it. I could host it in the cloud if I wanted to. I'm not going to though because I have no reason to right now. If you host it in the cloud, that means that it'll show up on a list when people go to join campaign. So right here, you can see all the hosted games that people have going on. Most of them are password protected. Some of them are not. I think most people would probably want to be password protected. So anyway, so I went to create campaign. I chose 5e. I typed in a name, and I picked the this theme D&D official. It's the cleanest looking theme in my opinion. I also really like the dungeon theme. It's a darker theme. Then these other ones are kind of more plain Jane. The default theme is really, really plain. So just keep that in mind. These are decals that go on the background of the game while you're playing. I tend to just remove the decal for the most part or leave it as a D&D logo, so I don't worry about that too much. There's some font stuff for other languages and things. I don't know. I don't really ever load those. So I'm going to go to load campaign. I'm just going to use the D&D official theme still. You can change it every time you load it, so you can select all that stuff right here every time you load it. But first I went to create this, and that's why it exists already. So I'm going to start this, and while it's starting, I'm going to actually go to my start menu, and I'm going to load another instance of Fantasy Grounds. You can only do this with Fantasy Grounds Unity. If you're using Fantasy Grounds Classic, I don't think you can run 2 instances of it. If you're just starting out with Fantasy Grounds, don't worry about Classic. Just stick with Unity. It does have bugs. It's just now coming into the light where the bugs are mostly minor. It doesn't have any major crashing bugs anymore that I've experienced. It doesn't have any of the it's still slow in certain areas, but it used to be extremely slow to the point where it was almost unplayable. Okay, so this is loaded over here, and I'll go over all that in a second. But in the meantime, I want to join my campaign. This is just so we can see it from the DM and the player's perspective and see how our actions affect the player. It's a nice little way to test things out. Now, I already have it right here. I'm not hosting in the cloud, so I just have to join it with a local host address. 127.0.0.1 is a loopback IP address that always points to the computer you're using at that moment. So this is the address of my computer right now, if you don't know what that is. And so I'm going to be able to join the game hosted on my own computer via my own computer's loopback IP address. You don't have to worry about that so much, what that means. This is just for testing. Just put that number in, and you'll be good to connect to your Fantasy Grounds campaign. I think that's it. So start. It's going to start acquiring file list. For a brief moment over here, you will notice that it's frozen. If I click, it'll go gray. This is another one of those areas where it's still slow. It does not process anything else while someone was initially connecting. It will take a few seconds, up to 30 seconds. You just have to be patient. And then finally, it will let it go free. If you look over in the chat over here, you can see Chev connected. So you can see the client connected. Now it's free. Now it's done. Now over here, it's still just processing the file list. Yeah, there it is. Acquiring the file list. So it's getting all the files from the campaign, which there's not a lot, so it shouldn't take too long. Okay, so first thing, campaign setup. There's a user manual. A lot of this stuff is still being worked on because the Fantasy Grounds Unity version brings in a lot of changes, and the wiki and manual are not totally updated because it's still undergoing a lot of development. You can go ahead and go through next and follow these if you want to. I'm going to just close it because what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you. Let me pull up my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. I'm going to show you how to use Fantasy Grounds like a regular tabletop. So if nothing else, you'll have a baseline to fall back on no matter when you're lost or whatever. You will be able to do everything manually just like you would in real life at a real table. So first things first, dice. there's a few things to know about dice. To roll them, you drop them in the chat. If you drop them anywhere else, they will roll, but they don't roll in the chat. They won't show up in the chat. They'll just bounce around and do nothing. So if you're actually rolling to try and get a value into the chat, do that. GM rolls by default are invisible. You can change that. If you look up here, there's this little cogwheel options. You can load that up, and you can put show GM rolls to on. I actually like to do that a lot because, and then down here there's a dice tower. So if I turn GM rolls to on, now if I roll, you'll see it will not have that little eyeball crossed out. What that means is that over here on the client, see, you can only see my second roll, the one that's visible. By default, players always open the character selection box so they can choose a character, but we're going to go even simpler than that, and we're not even going to let Fantasy Grounds handle our sheets, because we're just going to go ahead and say that D&D Beyond is what we're going to use for our sheets. And so we'll just come over here. In fact, if you don't even care about making rolls all visible to everyone, you can even just use the built-in sheets on D&D Beyond, because they now have dice rolls. So I'll go ahead and view Rum here, who I'm going to be playing tonight in a campaign. And so you can just click, there's an animal handling roll, and you can roll and get all that stuff right there. So if you just want to do that, that makes it even easier sometimes, since you got your sheet out there already. D&D Beyond is pretty cool. I really like it. Okay, it looks like my sound is coming out of the wrong device. There we go. My speakers. There we go. Okay. The other thing I like to turn on, though, when I turn on Show GM Rolls is Table Dice Tower. We're not going to go through all the options here because there's a lot of options. But I'm going to turn on this dice tower, and I like to move it. So if you look down here, there's a little dice tower. I right-click it and I unlock it because I like to put it right here. It's just easier for me. Okay, and then I'll lock it right there. What that does is now if I roll this, you can see the roll in the chat window, and if we look in the other chat, yep, you can see the 16 there. But if I don't want them to see a roll, I just drag it into the dice tower. And now you got a hidden dice tower roll. If I come back over here, you won't see it as the player. So that makes it, you get the choice in game. Because there's sometimes when a roll might give away more information than you think, or just the fact that you're rolling might give something away. In fact, let's roll this real fast and jump over and see. All they see is a shadow. You see the shadow of the roll. They don't actually see the full roll. And so they won't see the result. So the tower is kind of useful. I really like that. I kind of wish that was the default, that GM rolls were on and the tower was on, but it's not a big deal. You can bring it out here and with just a couple options. Okay, real quick, there are a couple things to keep in mind here. If you want to roll more than one die, you just click and drag, and then you right-click, and every right-click adds a new one. And so you can roll a whole bunch of them if you want to. So the other thing you can do is, so you probably want to roll a D100 once in a while, a percentile die. And normally you would roll 2D10, right? But if you do that, if you just grab a D10 and add one, it adds them together. I rolled a 3 and an 8 and got 11. If you right-click the D10, you got a percent sign here. If you hover over it, it says D100. If you just click that, you now are holding two dice, excuse me. And if you roll that, you'll get the percentile. You get a D100, 96. So there you go. These are useful if so far you can just roll the dice like manually and do the calculations yourself, add modifiers. You could just roll 2d20 and take the highest one yourself if you wanted to roll advantage. But if you want to, real quick, this little area right here is super easy to focus on. Advantage. You just click ADV for advantage, and if I roll 1d20, it will roll 2 and take the higher one, and it's green, showing you took the higher one. Disadvantage will show red, so it's super obvious you rolled with disadvantage. You can also do quick modifiers, so if I do a d20 with a +5 there, it'll automatically add the +5. Or you could do one of the minus modifiers, -2, there you go. You can do that. Or you can use your mouse wheel on this field. We'll just do a +10 real fast, just to show you. And notice it consumed the modifier and set it back to 0. So I added the +10, so the 16 + 10, 26. And then the modifier reset to 0. The little dots down here are something else I'll explain later. And so is the this current targets for chat window roles. This is for targeting later. It doesn't matter whether you have it on or off right now. Right now, for what we're gonna do, we're not gonna use any of Fantasy Grounds' awesome features. We're just gonna use very simple stuff. To that end, we're going to start with a very basic map. So we're gonna open Images and Maps. There's a button over here, and you'll notice there's nothing. There's categories up here, but there's nothing. So we're in the all category, and there's not a single item. In Fantasy Grounds, when in doubt, right-click. Right-click always has context options no matter where you are. Like over here, we can clear the chat window if we right-click. We can set a prompt icon. I'm not sure what that actually does. I'll figure it out later. Halt icon. I guess maybe this is just to tell, like if you're doing like a text-only type adventure, there's ways to communicate with players. But anyway, we'll worry about all that stuff later. When in doubt, right-click. One thing we can do right here is create a new image by right-clicking. You'll also notice you'll see these edit list buttons, these brown buttons in a bunch of places all over Fantasy Grounds. If you click that, you get additional options. So like add item, or if I have items on the list and I click it, then you'll see I can remove. And to remove, you just click once and then click again to confirm, and then it goes away. Okay, so we're going to add item. And then notice we get a new image here, and it pops up, and it wants us to type in. We're going to just call this Battle Map 1 for now. But this is like really confusing, right? Because you would have expected some sort of image surface, and instead you got all these weird options. Well, that's because Fantasy Grounds is a silly goose and didn't resize it right because it's empty. Now, if you open a predefined image that you've imported, it will automatically open and it's no problem. So they're not really handling the case where you just want to create a blank image that you can draw on very well. Just expand the window, and then we can go over some of the options here. Okay, so first things first, I like to create a grid. So I go to the grid, and then you can just drag with the mouse, which is super nice. So I'm gonna grid type square, toggle grid visibility. Okay, and then you can just resize the grid however you want with the mouse by left clicking and dragging. And it doesn't really matter. Without an actual image in the background, it's all kind of arbitrary. This is like Minecraft void space. You're like outside of the world, and it's like everything is relative. So it's like you can make the grid bigger just by zooming in. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing to compare the size of the grid with. So you can just zoom out to make the grid smaller, or zoom in. It doesn't really matter. Once you throw an actual image on there, you might start caring about the actual grid size in relation to that image. But for now, let's just go ahead and we'll leave this grid on there. And I'm going to go ahead and just bring some tokens in. So assets is your friend. This assets area has all sorts of stuff. So there's portraits, images. There's a bunch of stuff in there by default. If you bought any tokens on the store, a lot of them show up in here, even if without you having to manually load them in. A lot of stuff you buy and modules you download to have to be manually loaded, and we'll go over that later. But I think some of these token bags are just like included. These might be just all in here by default, I think some of these I paid for, and they just show up because when I go to settings and go to update, I think those tokens automatically just get pulled in because I purchased them on the Fantasy Grounds store. But anyway, let's just search, because sometimes that's the easiest. I'll just search for a human. Okay, and there we go. We got a token. So here's a token, and then we'll create another token here, and token here, and there you go. And then we'll say, okay, we need like a goblin. Okay. We'll find us some goblins. There we go. They're gonna battle some goblins. Okay. Now you can just drag those onto the map. It's that easy. You just take them out of the assets window and drag them onto the map. And then, so another thing is, once you've dragged them on, you'll be like, hey, I can't click anything. It's because you have to select this. This is the play mode over here in the top left. So there's a different options in here, but the hand in the play mode, that's when you can now pick up tokens and move them around. Oh, hey, look, they changed the token selection thing. It's more obvious when you have your token selected now. Nice. That was a problem. The black circle was not super obvious. Cool. Okay. So you can now play. I mean, you can put tokens relative to each other. And then one of the quick tools that you and players can use is just hold down both mouse buttons and drag, and now you have a ruler based on the squares. So of course that's 10 feet because this is 5 feet from center to center, or you can measure from edges, so 10 feet. You can count by grids. You can do whatever you want. Mouse wheel zoom in and out, and then you can just manually play. You can have this guy. Let's see. Go up and attack somebody, and you can just play like you would on a table. These are just action figures now at this point. They're just figurines. So that's the easiest way to play. If you want to move multiple tokens, you can grab this little token selection arrow here. That lets you drag these all around. You can drag multiple. The other thing that you can do over here with these tools is target selection. So what you do is you select. So hold on. Okay. So the black circle means you have a token selected. So let's say we're going to get Mr. Lumberjack here, and he's going to target this goblin here. I can then click target selection and target him, and you can now see he's targeted. If I click all these, they don't have targets. If I click him, you see he has a target. Now, there's a combat tracker, but we're not using it. So you'll want to make your own combat tracker or something like that if you're not going to use it. So this would be the easiest way to use Fantasy Grounds, and then also use like the stuff from D&D Beyond. Like they have a combat tracker now. If I put an encounter together, I don't use this, so I don't have any encounters, but let's go ahead and just find a goblin, and we'll add right there. And we'll add 3 goblins, okay, and then we'll save this encounter. Okay, and then run encounter. They have their own built-in combat tracker here, and eventually they're going to build in dice. But for now, you have to do manual entry, I believe, for the dice. It's pulling in player characters automatically, and I can roll the initiative for these guys and put them in here and start, and then you can just take care of it that way. You will have to keep track of which one. You can't name these tokens if you're just using it like this, but just like in real life, you can't do that either. So. Excuse me. This is the easiest way to play without using any features really in Fantasy Grounds. You got a plain Jane image and just basic tokens. The other thing you can do is you can paint. So come over here to the brush. Now there's a few bugs here and there, especially when it comes to the erase tool for some reason. So I like to isolate different parts of the drawing onto different layers. These are like Photoshop layers. This empty area is a list of layers. I'm going to add a paint layer here and select it. And then I'm just going to draw some stuff. Now the line tool is cool. You can just hold down and draw like this. And there is no undo. That's one feature I hope they add eventually. Or you can just left click once and then you get this kind of a line drawing like this. And you just hit escape to cancel a segment. So those are some different options. Now you'll notice when I erased before, it was a bitmap kind of erase. It erased it pixel by pixel as I was erasing the freeform drawing. Well, in here, these are actual line segments. They're treated kind of like separate objects. The eraser will just nuke them one by one, like that. So the eraser it might seem a little weird sometimes. If I do a square here, it connects line segments, and sometimes it will erase parts of them. It's very kind of weird. So just keep that in mind if you're deciding to use the eraser. It can be a little funky. The stamp tool, you can play with that later. In fact, I'll go over that in a little bit later. But these other ones are really basic. There's circle, rectangle, and then the line. But the most basic mode is to just use the line and the paintbrush, and you can adjust your color here. You can pick the color. So now we can do green. And then you can adjust the size over here. Here's the width of your brush. So we'll do like 0.5. And if this little thing is locked, it will keep both aspects in sync. Now we can draw bigger lines, just like that. Okay, and then I'll just delete this paint layer since there's no undo, and then I'll create a new paint layer. Just try to keep things isolated onto individual layers. Like, okay, here is, let's reset this to 0.1, put it back to black. Like, okay, so we got a square. We're in a building. Okay, and then I'll rename this to building outline or something. And then I'll just create a new paint layer. And then inside here, I'll draw things like things that move around. Like, let's say there's like a barrel. Like, I'll just do a barrel here. There's a barrel. You can maybe make it brown or something, but whatever. And then you can just delete that layer when things matter. It automatically creates new paint layers sometimes if you don't have them properly selected. There's a few little bugs in here, like I said, so just use with care. Just delete layers as needed, and then the things will go away. If you can keep things organized on layers, that helps a lot. Eventually, I imagine they'll improve all this. They're working on other stuff right now, like performance bugs and stuff. So usability is kind of taking a back seat for now. I will show you real quick effects just because they're easy. You have to have an effects layer, and it doesn't automatically add one, or at least it didn't used to. Let me see if it does now. Nope, it doesn't. So if you select effects and they're not working, you're like, what the hell? It's because you need an effects layer, and select that layer, then choose an effect. So another little usability bug, but let's go ahead and make it rain. You kind of can't see it without an image very well. Let's do snow. There you go. There's snow. Or water. Or mist. Or a blizzard. Let's see. Some of the cooler ones are like night vision. This gives kind of more of a green hue if you have an actual image, but because we're using this plain gray background, it's not as cool. But anyway, you can play around with that. So I'll delete the effects layer for now. Keep in mind that players with not so great computers, it might lag their computer. So sometimes we've had to turn these off just because you know, the computers can't handle it. Okay, so one cool thing. Let's come back here and draw a little bit. Let's draw some barrels. Actually, we'll do a little barrel here, a little barrel there. I don't know why the circle thing doesn't like to draw itself very well. Okay, so we've got this little room that we're fighting in, and all the tokens have line of sight. Well, what about Fog of War, you might ask? So there's masks over here. So let's go ahead and turn on and enable mask here. And then now you can click reveal area or hide area. So if it's reveal area, you can reveal some stuff to the players. It's more obvious when there's an image on the background, which we'll do soon. And so we can reveal, this is like old school Fog of War. You can just reveal stuff. Okay, or you can hide stuff. I'll hide this guy there, or there you go. Anyway, I'm going to remove the mask, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to this line of sight area, and there's a cool little feature over here, duplicate paint layer as walls. So we're going to select the paint layer, and we're going to duplicate it, and it creates walls. And so you can see that you can do different things. You can draw doors, toggleable walls. So those are like secret walls. So like if there's a secret passage, you can toggle it open like a door, but when it's closed, it just looks like a wall to the players. And then there's terrain. And I'll go over all those probably a little later, but for now I'm just going to use the line of sight in its most basic form. I drew something freehand. I came over here and I had it turn all those drawings into walls on this line of sight area. What that does, I can go back to play mode now, and I can turn on this eyeball, enable or disable LOS, line of sight. This is cool. You can see what anyone can see, and so it's hard because there's no image on the background, but one of the barrels is right here. You can see how when I'm behind the barrel, this token doesn't see the goblins. Let's go ahead and bring an image in here to make this a little better. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's our line of sight layer. Let's just, I think if we drag an image, it'll create a new layer. Let's just go to images and see what we've got. Let's go to, I think there's one called Shockbolt. Yeah. Shockbolt has some backgrounds. Cool. So we can just bring in a generic background. Here's a grass floor. Actually, you know what? We're inside some kind of a building. Let's just do a rock floor. Okay. There you go. Now we can really see what's going on in here. Probably good to start off with some sort of generic background. I don't think Fantasy Grounds is really designed to use the empty map space very well. Maybe that's some feedback. I'll submit them. But notice now we can only see inside this box, inside a line of sight. If I drag the token outside, then now I can't see inside the building anymore. Oops, I keep cutting that corner. But anyway, yeah, so it's connecting walls. Let's see. It looks like... No, that's right. I wasn't sure why it was... It looked like it was getting a glimpse inside when I crossed a certain area. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I was just cutting the corner with the token. But anyway, if you come in here, you can't see around the barrel or, you know, anything that's behind all the barrels we created. So line of sight's pretty cool, and it works with just the basic tokens like this. So, yeah. What else? Is there anything else we should go over for basic usage here? I don't really think so. There's not a lot more we can do. We could probably bring our rock floor to the bottom. Oh, I don't think we're seeing our drawings because the layers are out of order. There we go. Now you can see the actual black outlines. Cool. So we got our building outline here, and you can toggle the visibility. So you can turn those off or you can turn them on. Same thing with the walls. So we could turn off the line of sight, and then it goes away just for that layer. This is our line of sight layer. In fact, I usually try to name these if I can. There we go. It's kind of hard. You have to double click to get the name box open. And then I'll just call it LOS layer. And this use walls, that turns off whether it's using it for line of sight. That's the whole point of our layer. So yes, we want to use it. And then no matter which token you click on, you can see their perspective. So if I come over here and put him here, and then I click over here. In fact, let's move this here. Okay, so she can't see that goblin, and he can't see her, but he can see these other guys. And then he can't see him, but he can kind of see him. These two can definitely see each other. So that it kind of really helps with line of sight, and then you can still do like distance rules and stuff. So that's really useful. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and to share this map with the players. In fact, let's go look at that real fast, because you as GM can obviously see what everything can see by clicking around on tokens. But let's go look at what the player sees. Okay, so right now the player doesn't see much of anything. And so we're going to come over here and we're going to right click on anywhere on the map and do share sheet. Okay, this makes it a shareable sheet. If you go to the images thing over here, it gets this little P for public. If you hit this button down here, you can filter by only shared, and it will only show maps you've shared. That's a really nice, quick way to see what you've shared with your players and what you haven't. Now, if you've already shared a map in one session and you open up the game for another session, you can quickly unshare it. So here, I'll show you what they see. Now they see this map here, and they don't. This player doesn't see anything. Oh shoot! I just realized that the line of sight is not going to work. Wait. Why are we not seeing anything at all? Turn off line of sight. There we go. And these guys aren't seeing the drawings or anything. Why is that? Another bug. It looks like. Yep, another bug. That's okay. Most of the time, you probably want to use predefined maps, and they already have the line of sight and stuff done on them anyway. But anyway, we won't worry about the bug for now. I just realized you're not going to be able to see the line of sight as a player because you can't select a token and have it be yours, because that's the only thing. The only line of sight a player can see is a token that belongs to them. And so what you'd have to do is the player will have to create a sheet. Player 1, okay, and then I think you can drag, let's say I'm the lumberjack. Oh, let's move this. I think I can drag his token onto there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then I have to put myself in the combat tracker. Or maybe only the DM can do that. Okay, so let's go back to the DM side. We now have player 1 in here. And that person has selected their player 1. They don't have a portrait or anything. So I'm going to put them in the combat tracker. Okay, and then I'm going to just delete this token that we put out here. And I'm going to put the token from the combat tracker. Now, this links it to the combat tracker, and you can tell by the green, like, health status and everything. Now, we haven't set up anything on this NPC. It's empty. It has nothing but a token. But now, at least, that person can pick that player, and this token now belongs to them. And so now they can see what that token can see based on line of sight. So if I turn line of sight back on, and we come back over here, oh look, line of sight's sort of revealing some of those outlines. Now, as a player, I can move this guy around and see stuff. And you notice I can't move through walls, whereas when I was the DM, I could drag a token anywhere I wanted. Now I can't move through these walls or anything. Oh, look, like a secret goblin behind the barrel. Okay. So that's how that works for players, and we'll go more over creating the character sheets and stuff later. But yeah, so I would say you don't use the line of sight if you're gonna just use Fantasy Grounds for basic stuff, because then you've got to actually create a character sheet and put it in the combat tracker and link it all up that way. So we'll go ahead and talk about that next. I think. Yep, we're gonna create shell sheets. Basically, I'm going to teach you how to create character sheets without buying modules from Fantasy Grounds. You don't need to buy all the player's handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide or the monster manual or any of that stuff to play. You can just use very basic functionality for free. I highly recommend buying those things, which we'll go over later in the how to load modules and create real character sheets. But yeah, so I'm going to end this one here. I think I'll break these up. We're already at 30 minutes on this one. So here, this is the basic how to play, how to use Fantasy Grounds. And also, real quick, we should probably talk about how to import assets. Should be pretty straightforward, but if you hit the folder button here on the assets window, it'll open up Windows Explorer or Finder if you're on a Mac, and open it up to this directory. All you got to do to add tokens is drag them in here. Drag them into this directory, and then it will add the token there. And so let's actually do that real fast. Let's go to campaigns. Let's go to Arcana. We'll go to tokens. No, maybe I have global tokens out here. Okay, let's copy. We'll just copy this token here. It's Dragonborn. We'll go back to. Let me just close this. It's easier to probably open it this way. There we go. And then I'll paste it in here. Okay, close it. And then I should be able to go, yeah, it created a campaign bag. So now if I go in here, there's my Freya token. Okay. So that's pretty easy to add other images to use, like backgrounds and stuff. And same thing, just click the images tab, go to the folder. There you go, images. So let's just find a random battle map online real fast, shall we? D&D battle map. Okay, images. Cool. We'll copy this down. Let's actually do this. I'll just copy the address here and paste it here. There. And then we'll just save it as Grassy Path or something like that. Okay, and then we'll close. Load back up Fantasy Grounds. Again, got a campaign bag. There you go, Grassy Path. We could delete our rock floor, and we could just put our grassy path on there if you wanted to. And then I believe we could shrink that if we want. Down to that building. Yeah, there you go. So, you can mess around with it. It has a grid on it, so obviously we'd want to line our grid up. That's one nice thing about this grid tool, though. Click the mouse. You can just drag it like that and make it match the map's actual grid as much as you can. And then you can tweak it pixel by pixel over here to get it exactly right if you want to. But anyway, we could just for now remove the eyeball. It's close enough. But yeah, anyway, you can mess around with that stuff. To add images from the internet, it's super easy. Just pull them into that folder, and then they show up in here. Portraits, too. I've got some very basic ones. So, the data directory. I should talk about that. Every one of these has a data directory. That's the global folder. If you come into the data directory and you hit folder. Nope, okay. Got to go up. So go out of campaigns into Fantasy Grounds. Images, portraits, tokens. Those are global. So notice campaigns are in here. Here's all my campaigns. If I go up a level, then I've got these global folders. So all of my tokens in here, all these global tokens, they'll show up in the data bag in here. So that's good to know. And then images also, we have data. So if you have common maps and stuff you want to use in all your campaigns, go ahead and just drop them into the data folder that's out there. Let's see, Fantasy Grounds, images. Yep, matches up here. It doesn't load GIFs, so the GIF one is not showing up, but the other ones are. And okay, I think that's pretty much it. It's pretty easy to drop stuff in. Just the confusing part, a lot of people, is they try to drag stuff in, like they'll load up Chrome here and then just try to drag an image in. It doesn't work that way, so don't try to do that. Just drop them in these folders and then they'll work. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll pick up the next one in a moment. Thanks, guys.